For the last question, I'm just going to take Chair's prerogative to ask one of my own. You mentioned earlier that you were hopeful that maybe the parties would come together and continue to work throughout the spring and summer and not force an election in the spring. Given that it appears that the government has lost the confidence of the other opposition parties, and given the size and scope of what Canada's response to the US may have to be, do you think your government has a mandate to implement that at the moment?
To implement the response. Sorry, to implement the response, the retaliation. Yeah. So in the first iteration of in the first Trump presidency, it was a government response. It was a government-led response. It was there was more unity because we weren't on the precipice of an election, obviously, so that people weren't taking shots at one another in quite the same way. But it was a government-led response and retaliatory tariffs. And I think in this case, we're going to see a government-led response, and that's as it should be. What I would add, though, is if the government's response is ineffective, if it for over a sustained period, if we don't see the retaliatory tariffs or the outreach, and I think not only, as I say, outreach to our American counterparts, but really reaching out into the American media in a serious way to explain to Americans, as I think they know, that Canadians are their friends and allies and always have been. And whether it was Reagan or JFK, this has always been the most important productive relationship between two countries in the world, frankly. And so I do think where the situation becomes a sustained one, and where the response, if the response turns out to be inadequate in some fashion, parliamentary accountability is required, and the timeline is going to allow for that. So we're going to see a strong government response. I think we're going to see a very united response across premiers and people of all political stripes, and rightly so, given it's our national interest. And we're then going to see an opportunity for parliamentary accountability, and that accountability might mean that the government falls, or that accountability might mean in a more thoughtful way, I would hope, that it would mean that parliamentarians get back and debate the merits of the response, debate other elements that maybe should be in the response that weren't, or elements that were in the response that shouldn't have been, and we can maybe improve that response across party lines through parliamentary debate. I mean, that's a pretty optimistic view of where things are at, so maybe we just head right into an election. But I do think the timeline offers an opportunity for a really strong government response and then parliamentary accountability.
That concludes today's press conference.
Thanks so much.